Greetings and welcome to our series of weekly devotionals. This day we are wrapping up our weekly look at some selected verses from Psalm 119. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about this concept called the God-shaped hole. And basically what that concept says is that there is a hole in each one of us that cannot be filled by anything but God. And if we try to fill it with money or with power or with any other things we might crave, that it will not fit because it's a hole that is shaped like God, and only God can indeed fill that yearning, that longing deep within each of us. I think French philosopher Blaise Pascal first wrote about this in 1670, the year 1670, many years ago. It's of course been repeated several times since in many different forums, and It may or may not be biblical. There, you can certainly find some allusions to this notion of this gap, this chasm inside of us that can only be filled by God. You can find some allusion to it in the scriptures, and certainly in Psalm 119, the psalmist writes in verse 40, "See, I have longed for your precepts. In your righteousness, give me life." I have longed for God's ways, God's laws, God's presence in my life, the psalmist writes. And I was thinking about that whole concept of longing for God and thinking about my own relationship with God. And I think that there have been many ways in which I have related to God in my life. Of course, there were times when I was very afraid and intimidated of God. There were times when I certainly felt a respect and awe and wonder in the presence of God. There certainly have been times when I have felt deep love for God and God's presence in my life. Other times I have expressed what I felt to be trust and faith in God's sustaining presence for me. I can probably only recall maybe a handful of occasions when I felt I really longed for, really desired God's presence in my life. And that gets me thinking, this psalmist writes that indeed this should be our way of relating to God all the time, that we would always long for God's presence in our life. And if I'm not longing for God that way all of the time, then it raises the question, well, what am I longing for? What am I longing for in my life instead of God? What am I trying to replace God's presence with in my life? And I think, those are thoughts for reflection for all of us. What is it truly that we long for? Do we long for God? If not, why? And might we think about how that affects our life? And might we share the sentiment shared by the psalmist, that we truly long for God's presence in our life, that we can say, as the great father of the church, St. Augustine, said many years ago about God, when he said, "My heart is restless until it finds its rest in you." And that is my hope and prayer for all of us this day. Amen.